1944, the day that they died so that freedom would not. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen.
Please be seated. On behalf of the Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers of the National D-Day Memorial Foundation, I am pleased to welcome each of you to the National D-Day Memorial on this 79th anniversary of the Allied landing in Normandy. Today, we are also pleased to welcome a number of distinguished guests, including Captain Grawl, attaché from the Embassy of France, Lieutenant Colonel Zakaras, military attaché from the Embassy of Greece, historians John C. McManus and Kevin Hiemel, Major General Williams, the former Adjutant General of Virginia, Major General Crenshaw, Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs of Virginia, State Senator John Edwards, and other elected officials who are with us today, Richard Snyder, National Commander of the 29th Division Association, Colonel Daniel Collins, Chief of Staff of the 29th Division, and of course, the Honorable Glenn Youngkin, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are honored to have you all with us today in this special remembrance. We are especially excited to welcome a group of highly distinguished guests, our World War II veterans, with us today. We look forward to recognizing each of you later in the program. It means a great deal to all of us that you are able to take part in today's commemoration. This site is especially meaningful to me as my father, a U.S. Navy veteran, served in both the Atlantic and Pacific theaters during World War II and carried the scars from his service for the remainder of his life. Without a doubt, the Normandy landings changed the course of the war. It created a solid second front and provided hope to those who had been oppressed, persecuted, and under the boot of tyranny for years. On the evening of 6 June 1944, President Roosevelt, in a national radio address, delivered a simple prayer, a prayer about strength, unity, and devotion, a prayer that also exuded a quiet solemnity as he prepared the nation for loss, the loss of loved ones who would give their lives for the nation. In it, he said this about D-Day: "Success may not come with rushing speed, but we shall return again and again. And we know that by thy grace and the righteousness of our cause, our sons will triumph. They will be sore tried by night and by day without rest, until the victory is won. The darkness will be rent by noise and flames. Men's souls will be shaken by the violences of war. For these men are lately drawn from the ways of peace. They fight not for the lust of conquest. They fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate. They fight to let justice arise and tolerance and goodwill be among all people. They yearn for the end of battle, for their return to the haven of home. Some will never return." President Roosevelt was unsure at the time how many had paid the ultimate sacrifice, but he knew there were families at home whose lives would never be the same. Encircled among us today are 4,415 names of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardmen, both American and Allied, who would give their all in the cause of freedom on June 6, 1944. This memorial stands as a visible reminder of those who put themselves in peril to preserve the liberties we enjoy. I thank all of you, whatever your role, for what you have done in keeping this memorial and subsequently their stories alive, and in doing so, honoring the valor, fidelity, and sacrifice of the Allied forces on D-Day. Your commitment has helped preserve the lessons and legacies of that watershed event. For over 2 decades, the memorial has given emotional comfort, solace, and closure to those who needed it, and has educated thousands about the importance of remembering that the preservation of our liberty and our way of life does not come without cost. With that focus central to today's program, we shall, as is the custom here, dispense with formal introduction of the speakers who follow me. Our intent in doing so is to focus on what is said rather than the person saying it. By your presence here today, you honor not only the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice in World War II, but also those who lived to fight another day. Thank you for being here as we recognize their accomplishments, their service, and their sacrifice. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. On June 6, 1944, General George S. Patton was the most experienced combat, amphibious, and airborne commander in the European theater. He had even trekked around Normandy as a young officer, yet he was kept out of the most pivotal battle of World War II. I'm often asked, what would Patton have done differently had he been in command on D-Day? And so what I'm about to tell you is my speculation from my research on the general and what he would have done on D-Day. So on D-Day, there's 3 assault beaches: Omaha, Pointe du Hoc, and Utah Beach. At Omaha Beach, the troops came off landing craft, stormed the beaches, climbed the bluffs, and pushed inland. At Pointe du Hoc, U.S. Army Rangers scaled a cliff and then had a dual mission of knocking out artillery guns on the top and cutting the road that connected Utah and Omaha beaches. Utah Beach was a little bit more complex. 2 airborne divisions dropped behind the lines with the mission of capturing the town of St. Mary-Église and covering the draws coming up off the beach. Then at dawn, the 4th Infantry Division landed on the beaches and made a tenuous connection with the airborne troops. Patton, if he had been in command, I truly believe would have insisted on nighttime landings. The landings were at day at low tide so that the soldiers could take out all the obstacles. I think Patton would have traded darkness for the problem of the obstacles. When it came to training, Omar Bradley kind of passed the training down to the troops. He said, you guys are the ones storming the beaches. You should be able to be the ones who solve these problems. Patton would not have done that. He was very involved in training before the landings in Morocco, in southern Sicily, and then the 3 amphibious landings he did in northern Sicily. To break down what I think he would have done differently on each of the beaches, Omaha Beach was a kill zone. The troops came off the landing craft, were gunned down, machine gunned by the Germans. There was a breakdown in communication between the troops on the shore and the ships on the sea. And Omar Bradley, around 12 noon, actually closed one of the beaches, Vierville Draw, which you might remember from Saving Private Ryan. Patton, when he came ashore about a month later, he looked at some photographs of the troops that had come ashore at Omaha Beach, and he was disgusted. He said the outstanding mistake was, again, the overloading of enlisted men with too much equipment. Patton knew that in an amphibious landing, you could not burden your soldiers down because they're going to get soaked with water, and they need to be on the attack. I think he also would have doubled the amount of radios going ashore. During one of the landings that he led in Sicily, the radio broke down that was communicating with the Navy to shell the Germans. And I think he always regretted that, and I think he kind of would have believed that you need to really ensure better communication. And I don't think he would have closed Vierville Draw at Omaha Beach. He knew that first reports on a battlefield are always confused and almost always wrong. I think he just would have bulled forward and kept landing troops there. And then there were 2 things the soldiers were told going ashore at Omaha Beach: that there would be ready-made craters for them, waiting for them on the beach, courtesy of the Air Force dropping bombs, and that if they looked up, there'd just be a cover of aircraft above them. Neither of these things happened. Omar Bradley specifically told the Air Forces he wanted them to use low-caliber ammunition for their bombs. He did not want craters on Omaha Beach. He knew that he was going to have to bring tanks and trucks and vehicles up the beach, and they wouldn't be able to do that if it was cratered. Yet somehow this rumor got around. And as for this coating of airplanes in the sky, Patton never would have let a rumor like that go around. In fact, when he was helping plan the Salerno landings in Italy, he told the commanding general of the amphibious force, Fred Walker, he said, "You'll be surprised if you see a single airplane in the sky by day 3. So he knew the limitations of air power. Now, as for Pointe du Hoc, where the Rangers scaled the cliff, I think, again, Patton would have requested more radios. But the Rangers, when they got up there, had a signal that they could give whether or not to send reinforcements. And if they didn't give the signal, those reinforcements would go to Omaha Beach. I don't think Patton would have given them that option. I think he knew that once you attack, the Germans are very good at counterattacking, and he wanted to make sure the Rangers would be able to hold their positions. Finally, Utah Beach, I think he would not have allowed for 2 airborne divisions. Patton did not believe in anything larger than an airborne regiment in an attack, which I don't agree with him on that. But he had gotten his fingers burned pretty bad in Sicily with the airborne assault, where a lot of the planes were shot down by friendly fire. And that really burned Patton, and I felt like he would never want to make that mistake again. And then finally with Utah Beach, there's nothing he really would have changed about the initial assault, but around 12 noon, a special task force landed named Task Force RAF under the command of a Colonel Edson Raff, who was an airborne commander commanding some tanks from an independent tank battalion, some scout cars, and glidermen. Their mission was to race to St. Mary-Église and hold the town against any kind of German counterattack, and on the way, cover a glider landing field where gliders were supposed to come in. Both missions failed. Patton, I don't think, would have allowed an amalgamated force like that. He would have demanded, he would not allow an airborne commander who's used to jumping out of planes to lead glidermen who are used to charging out of gliders with an independent tank battalion that moves at the pace of the infantry. He would have insisted on using elements of an armored division. Their mission is always to race forward, or as they call it, haul ass and bypass. So I think those are the differences and the changes Patton would have made to the D-Day plan. Now, even though D-Day was a great battle and a great success for the U.S. Army, Patton called it quite a failure because of the high casualties. But I think this is less an analysis and more the reflection of someone who was left out of the battle and felt he could do better. Because as we all know, D-Day was a great American success. Thank you.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you're about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and the security of ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man-to-man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
The 2nd Ranger Battalion famously assaulted Pointe du Hoc, one of the key objectives of the entire Normandy invasion. When they went in that day on June 6th, it was only the beginning of about a 3-day bitter battle. 225 Rangers assaulted Pointe du Hoc. By the end of that battle, only about 75 were fit for further duty. 77 were killed in action in the course of the fighting, one of whom was Corporal Willie Caperton. And the legendary commander of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder, did what all good commanders do, which is take on the wrenching task of writing to the next of kin for his fallen soldiers. So he wrote this letter to the mother of Corporal Caperton, Mrs. Vera Caperton, and here's what he wrote. France, 13th July, 1944, regarding Corporal Willie Caperton, Army serial number 366-10503. No commanding officer can ever find words to adequately express his deep sympathy with those whose sons, husbands, or brothers finished their earthly tour of duty while under his command. The soldiers who formed the Ranger Battalion were the best, all volunteers. Their strenuous training and carefully supervised work and recreation brought officers and the men and their buddies close, so close that they learned mutual respect and a dependence upon each other to carry out the individual tasks in order that the unit plan might work. The day of invasion found these men ready, fully trained, fully equipped, not only physically, but mentally. On the day before they came to France, men of all faiths had gathered with the chaplain and dedicated the work at hand to God and their individual part in it as subject to his holy will. The mission of the Rangers was successfully accomplished, but as with all worthwhile things, the cost was great. So great indeed that it cost the life you cherished and lost us a comrade and a friend. A country must be great to call for the sacrifice of such men, but America will always be great just because such men have fallen in order that the principles expressed in our Constitution might endure. Every public honor will be accorded his memory. His president has already proclaimed him a hero. A grateful Congress will erect a monument to his name. The people of America will realize what that gold star means to those who loved him and will resolve to keep America worthy of such men. More than all these, however, the surviving Rangers, his buddies, will carry with them all their lives the example of his courage and will do their best to instill a nobility in the hearts of generations to come. So our comrade is gone, and we realize that there is a void in your heart which neither your country's gratitude nor our sympathy can fill. We, with whom he shared his life, ask only now to share his memory, that it might inspire us all to the gaining of an early victory and the making of a lasting peace. With deepest sympathy, James E. Rudder, Lieutenant Colonel, Infantry Commanding.
seated. It is an honor to have so many distinguished guests with us today, especially our beloved World War II veterans, as well as all of our veterans who have served. Thank you for being here on this very important anniversary. Today is a day to pay tribute, to honor, to remember those who on a given day, D-Day, changed the course of the war. The toehold gained on D-Day became the platform for the industrial might of the United States into Europe. The abundance of material passing through Normandy into the hands of well-led, courageous troops as they moved eastward ensured victory in Europe 11 months later and encouraged the development of the Marshall Plan and its implementation. The humane post-war treatment of former enemies and the rapid rebuilding of Europe provided the bedrock on which the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was founded 4 years later. NATO remained on the front lines throughout the Cold War and continues to play a significant role in ensuring safety in the free world today. D-Day has a rich legacy. As I reflected on what to say today, I was reminded of my conversations with Bob Slaughter, D-Day veteran and founder of the National D-Day Memorial. Bob passed away 11 years ago this May. When I heard that we had quite a few veterans joining us for the ceremony, I thought how ecstatic he would be by what he would see this morning. I feel certain he is smiling down on the ceremony, overwhelmed that on a nice, sunny spring day, scores of people have lined the monument to pay tribute. Bob was just 15 years old when he joined the National Guard. He was 6'2" and would grow 3 more inches by the time of the invasion. Part of D Company of the 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division, Bob came ashore on Omaha Beach. Bob noted this about his experience that morning. The enemy artillery found us when we were about 300 yards from shore, and I knew this was not going to be a walk-in. To our left, the machine guns were decimating A Company, beat a steady tattoo, and we could hear the rounds hitting the LCA next to ours. I remember helping Private Ernest McCandless, who was struggling to get closer in. He still had 1 box of precious .30 caliber machine gun ammo. I remember him shouting to me, "Slaughter, are we going to get through all this?" I didn't know how to answer him, so I didn't say anything. To tell the truth, I thought we were all going to die. I came ashore surrounded by the screams of men who had been hit and were drowning under their ponderous loads. All around me, dead men floated in the water. Lying at the edge of the high water mark, I watched a GI trying to cross the beach. He had a hard time running. I believe he was from the craft to our right. An enemy gunner cut him down and he staggered and fell to the sand. I can still hear him screaming. A well-marked medical corpsman moved quickly to help him. He was also shot. I will never forget seeing that medic lying next to that dying soldier, both screaming for help. Within minutes, as I watched, both men fell silent and mercifully died. Hunkering down, I hurriedly pulled off my assault jacket, spread my raincoat, and started cleaning my rifle. Both garments, I noticed, had several bullet holes in them. Miraculously, I had none in me, but the discovery made my knees go weak. Surveying the men huddled against the seawall, I knew a number of our squad were missing. After getting organized as best we could, we took off toward the base of a hill. Later that afternoon, we still hadn't got further than the top of that hill. As stragglers from different units and in various states of readiness and repair joined our number, I began to sense the extent of the hammering we had taken. Still in position at the top of that hill, but now more or less consolidated, we set up a perimeter defense as night finally overtook us. That made it about 11 p.m., digging shallow foxholes as we listened to a German unit settling in nearby. We drew the curtain on the longest day. At the time, I failed to grasp its significance, but I did understand, only too well, the horrific price in blood we had paid for the breach we had made in Hitler's fortress Europe. Bob was beyond proud to have this magnificent memorial remind us all of the courage, the sacrifices, and the achievements that were made by those who served throughout D-Day and the war. Though less than 170,000 World War II veterans remain with us today out of the 16 million who served, we are keeping their stories alive. Thank you all for your role in that. We honor them by remembering them, by paying tribute at this memorial every day of the year. It is exactly what Bob wanted. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Honorable Glenn Youngkin.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed veterans, fellow Virginians, today we meet on these hallowed grounds of the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, a place of reverence, a place of remembrance, a place of profound gratitude. A place where we come face to face with the inescapable truth that the freedom that we enjoy today, that the liberties we hold dear and yet too often take for granted, were won in battle, gained and then protected by heroes who gave their lives so we could be free. Behind me are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. Before me, the men who stormed the beachhead. Around us are the names of over 4,400 heroes who died for our liberty, who died on June the 6th, 1944 in an invasion of unparalleled scale that changed the course of human history. Today, we honor the incredible souls who defined victory with their unwavering courage. To the veterans, service members, and their families that are here with us today, thank you feels wholly inadequate. Please know that we salute you and are forever indebted to you and your families for your sacrifices. With us today is Ship's Cook Second Class, Ernest Fulcher, a fellow Virginian, a World War II and D-Day veteran. He's joined by his daughter, Becky, and her husband, Barry. Ernest, we are honored by your presence and service to our country. Ernest joined the Navy when he was just 15 years old. And at 17, he helped escort the boats of Normandy to shore. His daughter says in her own words that she's proud of her dad. She's proud that he served in that war as part of the greatest generation. They have a strength. It was a strength that awakened in the cities and the quiet towns across America, especially like this one of Bedford. It was a strength that enabled the ordinary to achieve the extraordinary. It was a strength that lifted America and her allies together to defeat fascism and face down true evil. Today, the depth of our gratitude and the magnitude of our respect for the men who sacrificed on that fateful day is beyond simple words. 79 years ago, both Europe and Asia were under siege. Continental Europe was lost. Friends, families, allies called out. Freedom itself was at stake. Americans answered the call courageously, selflessly. The Bedford boys of the Virginia National Guard became Company A, 116th Regiment, 29th Infantry Division, and were, as we all know, among the first to land on Omaha Beach. Like Ernest, these were brothers. They were fathers, sons, ordinary men called to perform extraordinary acts of valor. They gave up their farms, they gave up their families for the battlefields of Europe. And yes, today, while words may fail to pay fully our indebtedness to these heroes of D-Day, we honor them by remembering their strength. In fact, when the Bedford boys left American shores, it was Lady Liberty herself, a gift from France, holding the torch of freedom, who bid them farewell. D-Day was indeed the mission of all missions. Nearly 160,000 Allied troops, 73,000 Americans that stormed the beaches of Normandy, with Virginians playing a vital role. For nearly 2 years, the Bedford boys had trained. Days before the landing, Sergeant Richard Jeffrey of Virginia was given orders to work around the clock at his station in Greenland, just below the Arctic Circle. You see, he didn't know it at the time, but the weather he forecast would determine the tide of the war. General Eisenhower made the decision to go. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, after the call to advance had been made, the same Sergeant Bob Slaughter that we just heard of from Roanoke and many of the Bedford boys signed their names on a copy of Eisenhower's letter to the troops. And these words that we have just heard ring loudly through this memorial. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. These men were all part of a crusade to restore freedom when it had been wrongfully stolen. And at low tide, the unwavering and unyielding courage of our men, many carrying Bibles in their pockets, summoned extraordinary strength and charged the enemy lines. And through a sheet of fire, history moved through these heroic men to defend liberty and protect freedom. The rest is not history. It is the living, breathing part of our national heritage, which this memorial reflects so powerfully. Within 80 days, Paris was liberated. And with that, the beginning to the end of the war with VE Day on May 8th, 1945. Like so many after the war's end, Ernest returned to a quiet life in America. He built a church in Virginia and continued a life of service as a pastor to many. The sacrifices of our heroes on that day echo through the halls of this great memorial, through the ages, across time and across space. It reminds us that freedom is not free. It persists in the spirit that lifts us all up today D-Day solidified the values we cherish: uncommon strength, unity, selflessness, and an unwavering commitment to safeguard freedom at any cost. These are the values that define us as Virginians and as Americans. Today, we know the men and women of our armed forces have the same strength, earnest strength, the Bedford boys' strength. And we continue to demonstrate that free people can and will come together to defeat the forces of tyranny, defend freedom, and make the world a better place. Here, saddled in the extraordinarily beautiful and quiet hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, there is no more fitting place to remind us of our heritage and the strength, that extraordinary strength that is found in ordinary men and women, that is required even today. May we sing our national anthem loudly. May we say the Pledge of Allegiance boldly. And may we honor our flag daily. Because we must ask ourselves, can we carry on the legacy of the greatest generation through our words, our deeds, and our actions? Will we be a nation deserving of their sacrifice? And the answer is yes, we can and we must. Ernest, God bless you. God bless all of our World War II veterans who are here today. And may God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia in these United States of America. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor Youngkin, for those remarks, for being here today as we pay tribute to the men and women who served